I'm Mina. I never thought the person who would hurt me most would be my own sister. She humiliated me, not in private, but at her own wedding, in front of hundreds of people, our family, strangers, everyone. She joked about my divorce, erased me from every family photo, made me feel like I was nothing. But what she didn't know was that I'd spent years quietly collecting every lie, every betrayal, every secret she hoped no one would ever find. And the very next day, after the headlines exploded, she showed up at my door begging. How did I go from being the family's cautionary tale to the one holding all the power? The room smelled like polished silver and champagne. Everyone looked perfect. Teeth too white, laughter too loud, gowns too expensive. I stood at the entrance of the grand ballroom in Newport, Rhode Island, feeling like a guest at a party I was never really invited to, even though I had the same last name as half the people here. They glanced at me, smiled thinly, then looked away like I was background noise. Verena, my sister, was the star tonight, glowing in a custom gown, surrounded by people who treated her like royalty. I was the sister they rarely mentioned, the one who made different choices, as my mother liked to say when she thought I wasn't listening. When I finally made my way toward her, Verena spotted me and pasted on a smile like a mask. "Oh, Mina, you made it," she purred, her eyes scanning me up and down like I was an unexpected stain on her wedding carpet. "I wasn't sure you'd show." "Wouldn't miss it," I said flatly, ignoring the way our parents, Howard and Ellen, barely acknowledged me before turning back to Verena like moths to a flame. Her husband, Lucian, nodded at me politely, then looked past me, as if I were someone's assistant who'd accidentally walked into frame. A server handed me a champagne flute. I took a sip and scanned the room. Realized my place card was tucked at the farthest table, near great-aunts who couldn't remember my name. Of course. Out of sight, out of mind. The air shifted as the band quieted and Verena stood, tapping her glass with manicured fingers. She smiled sweetly at her guests. "If I could have your attention," she announced, voice smooth as silk. I felt it coming before she even spoke. "My dear family," she began, casting a glowing glance at everyone except me. "Some of you may know my sister Mina. She's had quite the journey." I froze. The crowd's attention turned, politely curious. Verena's smile sharpened. "She's taught me so much. Mostly, how not to end up divorced and miserable before 30. Laughter erupted around the room, not loud but sharp enough to cut. My parents smiled awkwardly, looking at their glasses. No one said a word in my defense. I stared at her, every muscle in my body burning. This wasn't the first time she'd tried to shrink me down to nothing. But tonight, something inside me shifted. I smiled tightly, raised my glass, and whispered under my breath, "You don't know it yet, Verena, but this is the night everything changes." I stayed seated at that far-off table, my champagne untouched, while the rest of the ballroom buzzed around me. The laughter still echoed in my head, sharp and clean like glass breaking. The photographers circled near the dance floor, gathering people for the family portrait. I heard them call out names: Howard, Ellen, Verena, Lucian, their voices like a roll call of who mattered. My name never left their lips. One of the waitstaff passed by, quietly dropping off a printed guest list for the photo session. I scanned it, already knowing my name wasn't there. The flashbulbs popped, capturing smiles that looked real but felt staged. I watched my parents beam at the camera, their arms around Verena, like they finally had the perfect family they'd always wanted. Without me. Astrid's message lit up my phone. "You're not even in the seating chart booklet." Of course I wasn't. I wasn't supposed to be here at all. I was the invisible sister who didn't fit. When dinner resumed, I glanced down at my place card again, shoved next to relatives I hadn't seen in 20 years. Some of them glanced at me like I was a stranger they couldn't place. I tried to eat, but the food felt like sand in my mouth. Then came the next blow. During dessert, one of my cousins, bless her awkward heart, walked over and handed me the microphone. "Mina, say a few words, your family." Before I could even touch the mic, Verena's voice sliced through the room. "Oh no," she said, her smile sugary sweet but her eyes cold. "We don't need any speeches tonight about heartbreak and bad luck." The entire room chuckled politely, some uncomfortably, but no one said a word to stop her. I glanced at my parents. Howard stared into his wine glass like it held the answers to life. Ellen avoided my eyes. The cousin who'd tried to hand me the mic quickly backed away, whispering, "Sorry, I thought—" It didn't matter. The message was clear. They didn't want me to speak. They didn't want me to be seen. But they forgot. Even silence can turn into a weapon. As the applause rippled across the tables, I sat perfectly still, the smile frozen on my face, and thought, they want me invisible. But when I finally speak, they won't be able to silence me again. The applause from inside faded as I stepped onto the terrace, needing air, needing space. The night was colder than I expected, sharp against my skin, cutting deeper than the laughter that still rang in my ears. I leaned against the railing, staring at the glittering skyline beyond the manicured gardens. How had I ended up here again, at the bottom of Verina's joke? It wasn't the first time she'd made me the punchline, but tonight, she'd done it in front of everyone. A server passed behind me, and I let the glass in my hand dangle loosely, fighting the urge to throw it over the edge. 3 years ago, I wouldn't have even been here. I was living paycheck to paycheck in a shoebox apartment in Dorchester, after Julian walked out on me like I was nothing but a bad investment. And when things got worse, when the bills piled up and my world caved in, Verina had shown up, not as a sister, but as a savior I hadn't asked for. She'd written me a check, her smile sweet but her words bitter. "You're lucky you have me, Mina. Not everyone gets bailed out of their messes." My parents had called it tough love. I called it a leash. I pulled my coat tighter around my shoulders, forcing myself to breathe. Inside, the party roared on. I could hear the clink of glasses, the swell of music, Verina's laugh like a siren call. I took one last breath and walked back in. The moment I stepped past the double doors, I heard her voice. She was at a table surrounded by a cluster of old family friends and business associates, the kind of people who smiled too hard and watched you like you were a stock price. "Oh, Mina wouldn't even be here tonight if I hadn't bailed her out when she hit rock bottom," Verina quipped, sipping her champagne as if she hadn't just gutted me in front of half the room. A few guests laughed nervously. Others avoided my gaze. My eyes flicked to my parents. Howard was busy adjusting his cufflinks, and Ellen stared at the tablecloth like she could disappear into it. No one said a word. I felt something inside me coil tighter than it ever had before. Something that had stayed quiet for too long. If they wanted to keep me small, they shouldn't have underestimated how much I can grow in silence. The music shifted just as I sat back down, my face carefully blank. The DJ's voice came over the speakers, too cheerful. "Ladies and gentlemen, before dessert, the bride has prepared a special video surprise." The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the room. I knew, instinctively, it wouldn't be good. The first few seconds were harmless enough. Clips of childhood birthdays, awkward family barbecues, Verina blowing out candles while I hovered quietly in the background. The laughter started small. Then the footage changed. Suddenly, there I was, 17 years old, braces and bad skin, tripping over my heels at prom. The next clip, me at a college party, clearly drunk, slurring lyrics to a pop song, while someone waved a red cup in front of my face. The last one hit hardest. My divorce announcement video call with my parents, my eyes red, voice cracking, subtitles added underneath. Once again, Mina fails spectacularly. The room erupted in laughter. It wasn't nervous laughter this time. It was entertained, delighted. A slow hollow burn spread in my chest. Verina's voice chimed in from the dark, sweet as honey. "Oh, Mina always knows how to lighten the mood." I glanced at Lucian. He looked away. Howard rubbed the back of his neck, pretending not to notice me. Ellen kept her smile frozen, like if she stopped, the whole charade would collapse. Astrid's text flashed across my phone. "You okay?" I wasn't. My throat tightened, my hands cold. It wasn't just tonight. It was every party, every holiday, every family gathering where I'd been the target, and Verina had been the golden child. They were all laughing because they believed her version of me. They'd rather laugh than see me. The applause rolled over the room as the video ended. Verina beamed, sipping her wine like nothing had happened. I stood quietly, adjusting my shawl over my shoulders, and walked toward the exit. Before stepping through the door, I glanced back at my sister, smiling in her perfect little world. "You've finally done it, Verina," I whispered, so no one could hear. Tomorrow, you'll learn what it feels like to be laughed at. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating nonstop on the nightstand. Missed calls, voicemails, all from the same two names, Howard and Ellen, my parents. I let the phone buzz until it stopped. Then it started again. By the fifth call, I gave in. I answered without a word. Their faces appeared on the screen, tight with frustration. Ellen spoke first, her voice sharp like she'd been rehearsing all night. "Mina, do you realize how selfish you were last night?" Howard nodded beside her, silent but stern. "You humiliated us," she continued. "You walked out in front of everyone. Do you know how that made us look?" My stomach turned, but I kept my face blank. "It's always something with you," Howard finally spoke. "You couldn't let your sister have her moment without making it about you." A bitter laugh almost slipped out of me. "Is that what you think? That I walked out because I wanted attention?" Ellen frowned, shaking her head like she was tired of the conversation already. "You've always been jealous, Mina. You can't stand seeing Verena happy." I bit back the heat rising in my throat. I'd heard this song before. Every time Verena burned the house down, I was the one they blamed for smelling the smoke. "You know what's funny?" I said quietly, holding their gaze. "You're more upset about me leaving than what she did to me." Ellen scoffed. "She didn't do anything. You're too sensitive." Howard added, "You've always been the difficult one." My hands curled into fists at my sides, but I smiled, calm and cold. "You might want to brace yourselves," I said evenly. "The perfect family image you care so much about, it's about to change." Ellen rolled her eyes. "Mina, don't be dramatic." Howard waved me off. "Just let it go." I ended the call without another word, staring at my reflection in the black screen of my phone. "You raised me to believe family is everything," I murmured to myself. "Let's see how much that belief holds when the truth hits the headlines." I didn't sleep that night. By sunrise, I was seated at my small kitchen table in Boston, a cup of black coffee untouched beside me. My laptop screen glowed cold in the dim light. Everything I'd spent months quietly collecting, financial statements, falsified invoices, internal emails Verena had foolishly copied me on over the years, sat organized in one folder. This wasn't rage anymore. It was precision. I opened a blank email, typed in two addresses, one for a senior investigative reporter at the Boston Herald, the other to a contact at the IRS whistleblower office. The subject line, fraudulent financial activity, Verena Mercer. I attached every file. A soft knock at my door made me pause. I knew it would be Astrid. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her hair pulled back, dark circles under her eyes. She glanced at the screen, then at me. "You're really going to do it," she said quietly. I met her gaze. She left me no choice. Astrid sat across from me, her voice soft but firm. "Once you hit send, there's no coming back." "She made her choice at that wedding," I said, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Now it's my turn." Without another word, I pressed send. For a moment, there was only silence between us. By mid-morning, my inbox lit up. A reply from the Herald's lead reporter. "We've reviewed the documents. Running the story tomorrow morning? Can you comment?" I closed the email. I didn't need to comment. The documents spoke for themselves. I powered off my phone, trying to ignore the adrenaline that ran sharp beneath my skin. Hours later, as I stood at my window, watching the gray afternoon fade into evening, my phone lit up again. Unknown number ta, New York. My breath caught. Verena Mercer was calling. I let the call from Verena ring out. She could wait. The next morning, my name was everywhere. The headlines screamed across every major outlet: Mercer wedding scandal, sister behind vicious attack. My social feeds were on fire. Hundreds of comments flooded in. Strangers accusing me of being bitter, jealous, unstable. Verena's team had moved fast. A press release framed me as an envious sister who'd fabricated documents out of spite. It was an impressive lie, almost believable. My phone buzzed again, this time a voicemail from my parents. I hit play. "You've embarrassed us beyond words," Ellen's voice snapped. "We raised you better than this, Mina. This isn't how family treats family." Howard's voice followed, cold and clipped. "Fix this." A text lit up next. "Julian, is any of this true? What the hell is going on? I stared at the screen for a long moment before locking the phone. Later that afternoon, Astrid slid into the cafe booth across from me, a large black coffee in hand. "You've seen it?" she asked. I nodded. On the mounted TV behind her, Verina's press conference streamed live. She stood perfectly composed, her face a picture of victimhood. "This isn't about me," Verina told the cameras. "It's about someone in pain, trying to ruin others' happiness. I forgive my sister." Astrid's lip curled. "She's playing saint." I met her eyes, steady. "She wants a public war?" I leaned back, voice ice cold. "Let's give her one." That night I opened my email again. This time I sent the reporter a second folder. Unedited statements, legal documents, Verina's own digital signature tying her to every fraudulent account. I wanted her lies burned into public record. Before midnight, I opened Twitter for the first time in years. I typed carefully, every word deliberate. "It's time you hear the real story. I won't stay silent anymore. #truth hurts." I hit post and smiled. By the time the morning sun scraped through the blinds, my phone was vibrating nonstop. News banners flashed on every screen. Mercer Empire under investigation. Scandal explodes after wedding. Tax fraud, embezzlement. Verina Mercer's dark secret revealed. My inbox was drowning. Missed calls, messages, strangers, reporters, distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Everyone wanted a comment. But the one knock I wasn't expecting came at noon. 3 sharp raps on my door. When I opened it, I barely recognized her. Verina stood there. No makeup, hair pulled back messily, dark circles bruised beneath her eyes. She wasn't the woman who had stood under chandeliers days ago, radiant and untouchable. Her shoulders slumped, her lips trembled. "Mina," her voice cracked. "Please." Before I could speak, she dropped to her knees right there in my doorway. "I'll do anything," she whispered. "Just make it stop." For a second, I couldn't move. The sister who had mocked me in front of hundreds was now crumbling like wet paper at my feet. Tears streaked her face. "Please, I was stupid. I didn't mean to. It's all falling apart. You've made your point." I wanted to feel something. Pity, triumph, rage. But all I felt was cold. I stood there, watching her unravel, until she finally gave up, wiped her eyes, and stumbled back to the elevator without another word. The moment the door clicked shut behind her, my phone vibrated again. A text from Julian. "I'm sorry." Another one followed. "I should have defended you back then. I was a coward." I sat on the edge of my bed, the messages blurring on the screen. Everyone who once ignored me was now looking straight at me, begging, apologizing, reaching for me like I was their last lifeline. I closed my eyes and breathed slowly. They all wanted something now. But I was the one holding the cards. The next morning, the world moved without mercy. Every news channel, every social media feed screamed the same thing. Mercer Group under investigation. Verina Mercer resigns amid scandal. Stocks plunge as tax fraud allegations. Rock Mercer family. I watched it all unfold from my couch, a mug of cold coffee in my hand. The anchors' voices were distant hums beneath the weight of everything that had already shattered. Verina released a statement by midday. Stiff, rehearsed, carefully worded. "I deeply regret any mistakes that have affected my family and business. Effective immediately, I am stepping down from all leadership positions at Mercer Group." Lucian filed for separation the same afternoon. The headlines called it amicable. I knew better. No one survives in that family without blood on their hands. Later that week, my parents released their own statement. Short, cold, generic. "We are heartbroken over recent events and hope for healing in our family." Healing. They wouldn't know what that meant if it knocked on their front door. A week passed before I walked back into their house in Newton. The same furniture, same polite air hanging stiff in the room. Ellen sat ramrod straight in the armchair, hands folded perfectly in her lap. Howard hovered by the fireplace, not meeting my gaze. "Thank you for coming," Ellen said, like I was a distant relative, not their daughter. No apology, no acknowledgement of years of cruelty, just awkward small talk about the weather, about nothing. When I finally stood to leave, I paused at the door and looked at them both. "You don't have to understand why I did it," I said quietly, "but one day, I hope you will." Howard shifted uncomfortably. Ellen's lips tightened, but neither spoke. Outside, the fall air bit cold against my skin as I walked away. Not angry, not bitter. Just done. Weeks later, Astrid and I signed the lease on a small office space in Cambridge. We named it Clear Path Foundation. Free financial education workshops for divorced and single women starting over. It wasn't much yet, but it was real. It was mine. The night we launched the website, my phone buzzed again. A message from Julian. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. I stared at it for a long moment before deleting it without replying. Some things don't deserve a second chance. That night I stood on my balcony, the Boston skyline stretching wide in front of me, lights glittering like tiny promises. Justice felt good, but healing, that would take time, and this time, it would be on my terms. Before we end this story, let me leave you with something I've learned, something I wish I had understood a long time ago. For years, I let the people closest to me define my worth. I stayed quiet when they laughed at me, stayed small when they told me I wasn't enough. I thought family loyalty meant swallowing my pain to keep the peace. But the truth is, you don't owe anyone your silence, especially when that silence costs you your dignity. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who hurt you the most. And when that happens, you have every right to stand up, to set boundaries, to reclaim your voice, no matter how uncomfortable it makes them. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about breaking free, about showing every person out there who's ever been pushed to the corner, humiliated, ignored, that your worth isn't measured by their approval. And now, I'd love to hear from you. Has anyone ever tried to shrink you, to make you feel invisible? What would you do if you were in my shoes? If this story touched you or made you think differently about family, drop a #1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And if you didn't like the video, that's okay too. Let me know why. I want to hear your thoughts, your stories, your truth. And don't forget, if you want to hear more real stories like this, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next one.